Sleeping Dogs is one of gaming's most underrated and misunderstood video games ever. Sleeping Dogs had a pretty good rise, but a pretty bad fall. I have played, owned, and finished Sleeping Dogs, and it kind of holds a special place in my heart because of how good the game was and how unique it was, specifically that of its time. But Sleeping Dogs came out at a very important and pinnacle time in gaming, to which the likes of many big AAA video games were coming out. But I'll get back to that later in the video and give some context to that. So what exactly is Sleeping Dogs? And it reads as follows. Sleeping Dogs is an action-adventure video game developed by United Front Games and published by Square Enix. It was released for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 and Windows in 2012. Set in a contemporary Hong Kong, the story follows martial arts and undercover police officer Wei Shen, who infiltrates the Sun On Yee Triad organization. Gameplay focuses on Wei Shen's martial arts moves, fighting, shooting and parkour abilities, and on gadgets that can be used for combat and exploration. Players must complete missions to unlock content and continue the story, but they may instead freely roam the game's open world environment and engage in both legal and criminal activities. The latter may incite a police response, the intensity of which is controlled by a heat system. Actions such as fighting, driving and racing grant such statistical rewards and earn the player achievements. Sleeping Dogs' difficult and prolonged development began in 2008. The game was announced in 2009 as part of the True Crime series but was cancelled by Activision Blizzard in 2011. As a result of the project's delay and budget issues, 6 months later, Square Enix purchased the publishing rights and renamed the game Sleeping Dogs, without the True Crimes license but considered as a spiritual successor. During development, United Front staff visited Hong Kong to conduct field research for the visual environments and sound. Upon its release in 2012, the game received positive reviews for its combat, voice acting and protagonist experiencing system and depiction of the city, but its camera and some animations were criticized. Within 1 year, the game had sold over 1.5 million copies. New outfits, missions and add-ons as well as 3 expansion packs were released as downloadable content in the 6 months following the game's debut. A remastered version subtitled Definitive Edition was released in October 2014 for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It features improved gameplay and settling and audio-visual quality based on community feedback. The macOS version of the Definitive Edition was released in March 31st, 2016 by Feral Interactive. The game spawned a spin-off multiplayer game that titled Triad Wars was cancelled in 2015. In 2017, a live-action film adaptation was announced with Donnie Yen set to star as Shen. Now, there's many other things towards this video game that really do shed light on where gaming was back then and where gaming is now. But here's essentially the fate of Sleeping Dogs and what really happened. In early 2013, United Front was working on a sequel to Sleeping Dogs. The game would have picked up after the original game. Once again, following the exploits of Wei Shen, he would be joined by a conflicted, corrupt partner named Henry Fang as they explored China's Pearl River Delta. The player would have the ability to arrest any NPC in the world and influence a branching storyline that swapped between both Shen and Fang. The game was said to be United Front's most ambitious game, which would have included a second screen app for mobile devices that would be able to interact with the world of the game. Playing as an Inspector Jane Teng, the player would manage the police force and try to control territories from a mobile device, with the choices made in the game affecting gameplay in the Sleeping Dogs 2. The mobile game could be played on its own, with the hope being the free-to-play game would point players towards the console. Plans for the sequel were eventually scrapped in 2013 before the project went into production, which is a really sad fate. But I mean, Sleeping Dogs needed a sequel, and that's what people need to understand, because now everyone's saying, oh, the game was goated, but Like you really need, it's a game you really need to play to enjoy. But there's a second part to this that really just, ties everything in a nice little bow and gives you closure. So here it is. Triad Wars is a cancelled spin-off to Sleeping Dogs, which was scheduled to be released in 2015. The game was initially planned to be released as a PC online game with more MMO elements, with the central goal being to rise to power as a criminal kingpin of the Triad underworld. It featured the same map as the original Sleeping Dogs. In October 2013, United Front Games confirmed that a game titled Triad Wars set within Sleeping Dogs universe was in production. The developer confirmed that it would be published by Square Enix and would be shown to the public in 2014. Triad Wars was described as the developers as something we've wanted to do for ages but just never had the chance. But now we do. United Front teased that Triad Wars would be a PC online game on September 19th, 2014. An announcement trailer premiered on September 22nd, 2014. In early 2015, the game entered its beta testing stage. It was announced in December 2015 that the game would be shutting down. Developer United Front announced the closure on Twitter and the Triad Wars forums. The developers published a statement saying, "We loved seeing how you played Triad Wars, but we know it wasn't right for many of you." Which doesn't make any sense, because I mean, this is a good game. Sleeping Dogs is in no way, shape or form a bad game. I don't know how people were kind of indecisive about the sales of the game. I mean, about how the game played. I mean, I'll get into more detail about things in my conclusion, but for now, let's just talk about the sales of the game and how I think one of the producers, the developers of the game, actually defended it. But let me read it up for you, and it reads as follows. According to Square Enix, Sleeping Dogs had sold 1.5 million copies by the end of September 2012. Square Enix president Yoichi Wada defended the game's sales and said that the firm might have had unreasonably high expectations for the game. He saw Sleeping Dogs as a strong and new intellectual property and said that the titles such as Sleeping Dogs tend to sell better over long periods of time, which is true of time in the West. Unlike in Japan, where most lifetime sales are achieved in the first month. On March 26, 2013, Square Enix announced that the game was expected to sell about 1.7 million copies in 2013. On September 10th, 2013, the company announced that Sleeping Dogs alongside Tomb Raider and Hitman Absolution had been successful in their game development but did not meet sales expectations and were considered the publisher's failure. Which is absolute bogus, because all three games that are being spoken in the thing I just read to you were extremely successful. Like Hitman Absolution was an amazing game. I'll even be making a video about that because I played the living daylights out of that game. But clearly, as you can see, Square Enix had very unrealistic expectations, and this is what put a lot of pressure not only on the developers but on the fan bases, because you can't make people buy a game they don't want to play, or you cannot make people buy a game that they don't really understand. And Sleeping Dogs was a game that was unique on its own and pretty much came out of nowhere. But I mean, the cinematics and everything of the game were amazing, especially the trailers. I mean, I wanted to play this game, but I must admit that I was a little bit weird when I played. It was a little bit weird when I actually got to play the game. But there's more to this, because they really tried hard to make this game successful. And the crazy part is this game was released just before the 8th generation of consoles. It was released just before. But let me talk about the DLC that they had. Yeah, they made quite a lot of DLC for the game. Okay, so it reads as follows. Square Enix announced 6 months of downloadable content to follow the game's release. Packs included content such as outfits, vehicles, experience points, boosts, tasks including money hidden around the city for players to find, vehicle races, weapons, missions, and fight movesets. Square Enix released a total of 5 content packs along with various pre-order bonuses such as the Dragon Master Pack, which was released in November 2012. The last downloadable content for Sleeping Dogs was the Wheels of Fury Supercar expansion released in February 2013. The first story-driven game expansion is Nightmare in North Point, was released in October 2012. Its theme is based on China's horror folklore and features Chinese vampires known as the Jingxi. The second story-based expansion is Zodiac Tournament, was released in December 2012. The expansion adds an island on the game with fight arenas, enemies, bosses, and outfits. Inspector Tang asks Shen to investigate an illegal fighting. So that's the second one. Now the third and final story-based expansion is Year of the Snake, was released in March 2013. It adds 6 missions set after the game's story. The additional missions feature Shen investigating terror attacks around Hong Kong stemming from a cultist group who believed that they will achieve spiritual salvation through the cleansing of Hong Kong's residents. Now that's an amazing DLC if you ask me. That probably adds quite a lot of content more to the game. And you know, this game actually almost had a film adaptation, and it was set to be really big because this game was even set after a really huge movie called, I think, Protector 2. But let me read up about the film adaptation. In March 2017, a live-action film adaptation of the game was announced. It was being produced by Neil Moritz with Donnie Yang starring as Wei Shen. A release date for the first game has yet to be announced. In February 2018, Yen stated on various social media accounts the film was in production. I don't think that the movie has been released yet. I tried doing some research. I mean, if I find anything during editing, I'll put it on the screen. But that's really unfortunate that the game was in the state. But let me get to my conclusion. Now, I would say that the game was misunderstood for what it was, and the game didn't really, for me personally, the game didn't really play the way I thought it would. Because I think the other thing is people were expecting a Grand Theft Auto clone. And this game definitely was not that. This game came from a family. This game was supposed to be a true crime game. And honestly speaking, that's probably where they slipped up with Activision Blizzard not publishing the game as true crime. If they had kept it as true crime, they probably would have gotten more sales, specifically with a Western audience, because True Crime was a very heavily American-based game. And maybe I'll make a video about that personally, and maybe I will reference Sleeping Dogs, because especially for its time, True Crime was very, specifically the first one. The first True Crime game was one of a kind. No one had really done anything, especially being that, you know, of a third-person open-world format. And that's why Sleeping Dogs was probably very successful, because it introduced open world with fighting games, with, you know, a lot of good animations and fighting styles. And this is one of the reasons why this game stands out today. And everyone's calling it underrated. I mean, maybe there might be a second game coming, who knows, but this game definitely needed a sequel. I mean, the graphics and visuals were a little bit dated, but it's a game that was made back in 2012. And that being said, the game was released in 2012 when such games as Black Ops and everything, when many games were being released, and this game was released just before GTA 5 came out. So I'm pretty sure that in that year, that was their biggest mistake, releasing it it being in 2012 with all the big releases that were out back then. And it pretty much, I'm sure, divided the fan base of when to buy, because these days there's only really one game that's expected to be good. So it's Elden Ring, or it's Modern Warfare 2. So if there's one game being released maybe in a year, if there's 3 or 4 big heavy title games that have been announced the year before and people are expecting it the next year, they will have more money to buy the games. But back then there were so many different video games coming out at once, it was probably hard to choose. Now, my conclusion is that they need to make a second game. They need to make a sequel to bring back the fan base. And honestly, it was a very smart idea to start the IP. And the fact that one of the designers defended the game is really good. But this is the Chilly Man signing off. I thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all the support. This is the Chilly Man signing off. Peace out.